Hello, my dear students. Welcome back to the online lecture video series on electromagnetic theory by AVS Deepak. In the previous module, we have seen the classification of materials based on their response to electric fields. And there, we have seen that there are two basic classes of materials, conductors and insulators. Conductors are those type of materials which allow movement of free charge carriers, whereas insulators are those which don't have any free charge carriers, thereby restricting the current flow. Insulators will not allow any current to flow through them, whereas conductors allow current to flow through them. So that is the basic difference between conductors and insulators. The applications of conductors can be seen in any electrical circuit or electronic circuit for that matter. Similarly, insulators are also used wherever you want some sort of protection from the electric field. Examples are the casings of your coaxial cables. Similarly, ceramic used in some testers, circuit testers, and any handles you use, right? Generally, any handles are electrically insulating materials, thereby protecting you from shock. So, insulators also many applications. In the current module, we discuss a special type of materials called dielectrics. Dielectrics are different from both the classes which we have discussed earlier. Yes, although dielectrics won't conduct, they can't simply be considered as insulators, because dielectrics are used in many applications to store charges. Remember, conductors were used to conduct electricity, insulators were used to prevent electricity from flowing, whereas dielectrics are used to store charges. How will these dielectrics help us in storing the charges would be cleared by the time we reach the end of this module. Before we discuss the behavior of electric field in dielectrics, let us first classify the dielectrics. Dielectrics are basically classified into two types. They are non-polar dielectrics. Non-polar dielectrics are those type of dielectrics which do not have inherent electric dipoles in them. Whereas polar dielectrics are those materials which have inherent dipoles in them. I have already used two terms, dipoles and dipoles. What are these dipoles? An electric dipole is a special setup of charges where equal and opposite charges, when I say equal and opposite charges, magnitude is same but the polarity is opposite, which are separated by small distance. Such setup of charges is called an electric dipole. See, if you have a positive charge here and a negative charge here, from the conventional laws of physics, there is an attractive force between them and these charges tend to merge. Right? That is what happens from classical physics. But these charges are not merged. These are bounded charges. Because these are bounded charges, there is no force of attraction between them. Because there is no force of attraction between them, a constant distance is maintained between them. That is called the separation of the charges. the length of the electric dipole is also the name given to it. Now, you see, this is a charge at rest and this is also a charge at rest. Because of charges at rest, there is an electric field produced. Now, the net electric field because of both these charges is as usually sum of the electric field produced by the individual charge. So we would see and analyze what would be the electric field intensity because of an electric dipole in the later slides of this module. But right now, I want you to understand what an electric dipole is. Electric dipole is a special setup of static charges where equal and opposite charges are separated by a small and finite distance. Right? So this is an electric dipole. Let us see how this concept of electric dipoles help us in storing of charges. As I have told you, dielectrics are of two types, non-polar dielectrics and polar dielectrics. Non-polar dielectrics, even in presence of electric field, will not conduct electricity as there are no free charge carriers. This sentence is applicable for both non-polar and polar dielectrics. But in dielectrics, what is different from conductors is that dielectrics are generally made of covalent bonds, whereas conductors are generally made of ionic bonds. Because of this, application of electric field breaks the ionic bonds. Because ionic bonds broke, you would create ions, and those ions are free to move. They are the free charge carriers. Whereas dielectrics are made of covalent bonds. These covalent bonds won't break, instead they stretch. That is, the shape of the atom or molecule change. Because of the shape of the molecule or atom change, the attractive force between the positive nuclei and the negative electron cloud weakens, thereby acting as if there is no attractive force between them, creating a dipole from a molecule. That is how electric dipoles are generated in non-polar dielectrics. I would illustrate this more clearly using some diagrams. So consider an atom. See, I am using atomic representation because it is easy to illustrate my point, but the same can be done using molecules, but that is not we are going for. So if it is an atom, there would be a nuclei and an electron cloud. Right? That is how the general atomic structure is, right? So now imagine that there are 16 electrons in this electron cloud. That means there would obviously 16 protons. Now because 16 protons and 16 electrons both are of equal charges, the atom is neutral. There is no charge inside an atom. As you know, by nature, no body is a charged body, every body is a neutral body. Same is the case here. But once an electric field is applied, what does this electric field do? This electric field gives the electron some energy. Now, if it is metals, the energy given by this electric field to the electrons is sufficient enough for the electrons to break the bond completely, come out of its atom and be able to move as the electric field dictates. But in these type of atoms which comprise dielectrics, instead of electrons breaking out from the electron cloud, there is a deformation to the atom as a whole because of the change in the attractive forces, right? Now, once this atom stretches, the attractive force between the positive charges and the negative electrons, which are far away, is weakened. Therefore, there are some electrons which come out of that attractive force. Now identify that these electrons which are out of this electron cloud don't have enough energy to roam around freely. At the same time, they have sufficient energy to get rid of the attractive force which is pulling these electrons towards the nuclei. That is, these are now neither moving towards the center nor moving away from the center. These are static charges. One more name given to this is immobile charges, or they are also called as bounded charges. The difference between these type of charges and the free charges is that these charges are not able to move. These electrons are not conducing towards movement. These are static, they can't move. But having said so, this body is not neutral. It is having some group of electrons. Therefore, it is a negative charge. Imagine that two electrons gain sufficient energy to get rid of the attractive force towards this nuclei. That means this body now has two electrons worth negative charge, right? Similarly, we have observed that there are 16 protons at the nuclei because protons are not going anywhere, and 16 electrons in the electron cloud. Out of them, 2 have gone out. That means still there are 14 electrons inside here. These 16, out of the 16 protons which are at the nuclei, 14 have been nullified by the electron cloud. That means there are 2 protons of charge which is unbalanced, and here you have 2 electrons of charge which is unbalanced. That means the magnitude of the charges are same, but here it is positive charge at the nuclei, and away from the electron cloud it is negative charge. This is how dipoles are created. This setup you see, let me remove this. This setup which you see is an electric dipole. That is how an electric dipole is created out of an atom from a non-polar dielectric material. If I look at the bigger picture on what is happening here, see, any dielectric material is not just made of one atom, right? So it is made of multiple atoms. So if I consider the multiple atoms here, upon application of electric field, each atom would turn into a dipole. See, this process of creating dipoles out of atoms is called the polarization. Why the name polarization? Because these are neutral, but now I have given some polarities, therefore the name polarization. Right? What is the bigger picture? What is happening at the surfaces? At surfaces, you may see all the negative charges are on one side, all the positive charges are on one side. So this is what is happening. On surfaces, all the negative charges come to one surface and all the positive charges have come to the other surface. You may remember this is exactly what has happened when a conductor is placed inside an electric field. When a conductor is placed isolatedly inside an electric field, then because of the force of the electric field applied on the atoms inside the conductors, these bonds have been broken and the charge carriers have been created. Those charge carriers move as directed by the electric field. because the electric field is pointing in this direction, all the positive charges gets deposited here, and because the negative charges move in the opposite direction, all the negative charges gets deposited here on the surfaces. This is what has happened when isolated conductor is placed inside an electric field. So till now, the effect looks pretty similar. But the difference between these two setups is, upon removal of electric field, as soon as the electric field is removed, now these negative charges and positive charges, which are mobile charge carriers, have force of attraction between these two. Therefore, they tend to meet and balance out. Thereby depleting the charges completely. By some time, there will not be any free charge carriers. By the some, when I say by some time, it is very, very, very small time. Almost as if the time is negligible. Just inside negligible time interval, all the free charge carriers which were there when there is an electric field will be depleted as the electric field is removed instantaneously. But in case of dielectrics, these positive charges and negative charges are not mobile charges. Instead, they are bound to their electric dipole. Now, how is that electric dipole created? That electric dipole is created because some electrons have gained some energy which have pulled them out of the attractive force towards the nuclei. Now, as long as there is that energy, the electric dipole remains. But gradually, the energy will be reduced. As the energy gets reduced, the electrons go inside the attractive force of the nuclei, thereby returning back its true original state. So after some time, this would also, the bounded charge carriers also gets depleted, and this will again become to its original state. But there would be some finite gap, that when I say gap, finite time interval between these charges which are deposited at the surfaces to return back to their original states. So that duration is the duration during which you would be able to store charges. So that is how these dielectrics are used in construction of capacitors, where capacitors have infinite applications. For example, say your mobile phones and laptop batteries. Any rechargeable batteries have some sort of capacitance. The function of capacitance is just to store charge, right? So this is how the polarization occurs in case of non-polar dielectrics. If we talk about polar dielectrics already have some dipoles in them, but they are not directed. Those dipoles which are there inside have no alignment. Because of this, the effect of dipoles can't be observed. The net effect of the dipoles is zero. But when an electric field is applied across this, all the dipoles are aligned according to the direction of applied field. Now there is some direction, hence there are observable effect of dipoles. See what is happening in polar dielectrics. See, imagine that these are how inherent dipoles are lying in the polar dielectrics before the application of electric field. As and when the electric field is applied, they align themselves. There would be a torque experienced. Each dipole would experience a torque which creates an angular movement, and this angular movement would be settled as all the dipoles reach to this position, which is directed by the electric field. You may see the net effect of polar dielectrics and non-polar dielectrics is pretty similar. So for our discussion, we don't differentiate between polar dielectrics and non-polar dielectrics. For us, any are same. I am telling you that because of electric field, these dipoles have been created. Yes, that is pretty sure. But what is the effect of this dielectric material? What is happening to the electric field? To analyze that, we definitely need to know what would happen because of one dipole. And if I know what is happening because of one dipole, then I would be able to extend that analysis for all the dipoles and thereby getting what is happening inside dielectric. So the basic block is dipole. So let me analyze the electric field because of a dipole. Imagine that this is the origin and two charges of q coulombs and minus q coulombs are placed on either side of the origin separated by distance d. Imagine that these are placed along z axis. Okay. Now this is the point at which I intend to find the electric field intensity because of the dipole. Now this is the positional vector of the point r bar. Its magnitude is r. That is, r is the distance from the origin to the given point. Similarly, r1 is the distance from positive q coulombs to the given point, and r2 is the distance from negative q coulombs to the given point. If we consider spherical coordinate system, theta is the angle the positional vector makes with the reference axis normal to the reference plane, that is our z axis in this case. So this is theta. So this point in spherical coordinate systems can be represented as r comma theta comma phi, where I am not bothered about phi for this instant. Right. So now one way of obtaining electric field intensity is to apply superposition theorem to the Coulomb's inverse square law. That is, I consider the electric field intensity at this point, that is because of this charge at this point, and electric field intensity because of this charge at this point, and add each of them. Right? That is one way. Another way, which is much more simpler way, is calculating the electric potential first and determining the negative gradient of it, because you may remember in our discussion of electric field intensity and electric potential, I have told you that electric field intensity is always directing towards the direction of decrease of electric potential. That is, electric field intensity is the negative gradient of electric potential. And electric potential is a scalar quantity. Hence, it would be much easier for me to determine the scalar quantity and to determine the gradient rather than determining two different vectors based on two different centers. So when I discuss the electric field intensity because of this point, this would be my center, and when I discuss the electric field intensity because of this point, this would be my center. And now I have two different centers and I have to combine the vectors formed by those two, which seems pretty difficult to me. Instead, I would be worried just about the scalar value of electric potential and then calculate the negative gradient of it, which gives me an easier solution. But the electric potential because of any point charge is given by Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R. Therefore, the electric potential because of plus Q coulombs of charge is Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R1, and electric potential because of minus Q coulombs of charge is minus Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R2. Understand that R1 and R2 are the distance between plus 1 coulombs of charge and minus Q coulombs of charge towards the given point. The net electric potential because of this setup can be determined by applying superposition theorem. That is, I determine the electric potential because of plus Q coulombs, which I have already done, electric potential because of minus Q coulombs, and I add them to get the net electric potential because of this setup. So if I do that, that would be Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R1 minus Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R2. Even be simplified to get R2 minus R1 by R2 R1. And I have got this expression, but now I have to apply gradient, right? Gradient of, because Q by 4 pi epsilon naught is constant, I should be applying gradient of R2 minus R1 by R2 R1. But gradient is a function which is defined for R, that is the distance from the center. But here I don't have distance from the center. Instead, I have distances from two different points. Therefore, my idea is now, instead of using this expression in its original form, I would try to express this R2 R1 in terms of R, and thereby applying gradient, which would further simplify my problem in hand. To do that, because this R is much greater than D, because as you have seen, this D is a subatomic distance. When we have seen the case of non-polar dielectrics, this D is a subatomic distance, that is a distance inside an atom. When atoms have stretched, that is the distance we got, right? So it is a subatomic distance, and this R is a measure in physical space. It obviously is very great compared to the subatomic distance. Therefore, from a person who is standing here, who observes this to be at finite distance, can consider this point to be at infinite distance, very high distance. And these lines, one originating from R1, one originating from R2, and one originating from the center, all are not meeting anywhere in his observation, but are meeting only at infinite distance. If the lines are meeting at infinite distance, they can be approximated as parallel lines. So now to simplify this expression, that is to express this R1 and R2 in terms of R, I consider that this R1 and R2 are almost parallel. That is, they are approximated as parallel lines. When they are approximated as parallel lines, the above expression would be much more simpler and more intuitive. Let us see how. See, this is the original setup which I have. Now applying that R is much greater than D and assuming that these are almost parallel, now my setup So this is my plus q charge, this is my minus q charge, this is my origin, no change here, and this is the positional vector, right? And R1 and R2 are also lines which are parallel to R, right? That is the approximation which I have made. Consider this angle where R1 is making with the z-axis and R2 is making with the z-axis. Because these three are parallel, the angle made to the transversal is also equal, right? So these are what? These are nothing but the corresponding angles. Because the corresponding angles are equal, these angles are also theta and theta. Let me erase the ink. Now consider a rectangle here. Rectangle A, let me say this is B, this is C, this is D, and this is E. Consider the rectangle ACDE and side BE. From observation, it is pretty clear that BE is equals to R2. There is no doubt about it. And BE can also be written as BC plus CE, right? Where CE is same as AD because they are opposite sides of a rectangle. So BE can be written as BC plus AD, where AD is R1 and BE is R2. Therefore, BC is R2 minus R1. This is called path difference. You may observe that this R2 minus R1 is the numerator of electric potential, where you have seen Q by 4 pi epsilon naught R2 minus R1 by R2 R1. Let us bother about the denominator later, but you may see this R2 minus R1 is the term which I want to determine in terms of R, right? In order to do that, consider the side AB. You see, AB is nothing but D, right? Now consider the right angle triangle ABC, where the right angle is angle C, that is hypotenuse is AB. But what is AB? AB is equals to D. So if I determine cosine of this angle theta, cos theta, which is equals to adjacent side BC divided by hypotenuse AB. The BC by AB is cos theta, where AB equals to D. Therefore, BC equals to AB cos theta, right? BC equals to AB cos theta. Because this BC equals to AB cos theta, where AB equals to D, BC equals to D cos theta. BC equals to D cos theta and BC equals to R2 minus R1. Therefore, the numerator term R2 minus R1 is equal to D cos theta. Very, very, very straightforward. R2 minus R1 equals to D cos theta from the right angle triangle ABC and from the rectangle ACDE. Right? So if you don't understand, please go back and look at the video again. So R2 minus R1 is equals to D cos theta. I have reduced the numerator term to something which I know. Right? See, D is a constant. Therefore, applying gradient towards a constant is not a difficult task for me. And moreover, this cos theta is also a measuring spherical coordinates. Therefore, I can apply gradient towards this function. So this term I don't have any problem, whereas I still have to work for the term r2 r1 which is in the denominator. I have got r2 minus r1 to be d cos theta, so I can write r2 equals to r1 plus d cos theta, right? Similarly, using the similar analysis for the triangle with rectangle which I can construct, if I construct a rectangle of this sort, see, if I consider this to be, for example, some A, B, C, D and E, from this rectangle and from this rectangle triangle, you understand this AB is no longer D, this is equals to D by 2. This side is, this side here I am talking about, is cosine of this side, that is D by 2 cos theta, which is equals to R2 minus R, right? So I suggest you work it on your own, but I can say R2 minus R is equals to half d cos theta. Therefore, R2 equals to R plus half d cos theta. Not just that, I can also say R equals to R1 plus half d cos theta, or R1 equals to R minus half d cos theta. Right? Now, if I multiply R2 R1, R2 R1 is R plus half d cos theta times R minus half d cos theta. It is looking like A plus B times A minus B, which is equals to A square minus B square. Therefore, this can be equated to R square minus D by 2 cos theta whole square. If you remember, R was much greater than D. That means R would be even more greater than D by 2. If R is more greater than D by 2, that means it is obviously greater than D by 2 cos theta, because the range of cos theta is 0 to 1. And if it is the case, then R square is even more greater than D by 2 cos theta whole square. It is so less compared to R square that this can be neglected, and this R2 R1 can be approximately equal to R square. What is this? This was the denominator. Now I have the numerator also in terms of spherical measures and the denominator also in terms of spherical measures, right? So this R2 minus R1 was equals to D cos theta, and R2 R1 is equals to R square. So this is equals to D cos theta by R square, which is completely in spherical measures except for this D, which is a constant. Now you may remember the expression D cos theta can be equated to D bar dot AR cap. Why is that so? Because any vector D bar dot AR cap is equals to mod D bar mod AR cap cos theta, where theta is the angle between D and R bar, right? Fine, what is mod AR cap? Mod AR cap is 1, mod D bar is D, and cos of angle between D and R is theta, so it is D cos theta. So D cos theta can also be written as D bar dot AR cap, right? What is this D bar? This D bar is the vector joining negative q coulombs to positive q coulombs. For any dipole, d bar is the vector joining negative charge to the positive charge, and q is the magnitude of each charge. This qd bar for any dipole is called the dipole moment, and is represented as p bar, small p bar. Small p bar is the representation of dipole moment. Dipole moment is a vector quantity whose direction is along the negative charge towards the positive charge, and its magnitude is the product of magnitude of each charge and the distance of separation between them. So that is the dipole moment. Now that we have obtained the electric potential, it is my duty to get the electric field intensity, where the electric field intensity is the negative gradient of potential of electric dipole. You may remember that if you have done your assignments properly, this is an assignment given to you to determine the expression of gradient of a scalar field in spherical coordinates. So this is the expression of gradient of scalar field in spherical coordinates, and I am determining the gradient for electric potential because of an electric dipole, and its negative gradient would give me the electric field intensity because of the electric dipole. So if I substitute the value that electric dipole is equals to q by 4 pi epsilon naught d cos theta by r square, you may see that this function is independent of phi, therefore there would not be any a phi component. This function is dependent on theta and on r. Therefore, when I differentiate this with theta, I would get minus sine theta, and 1 by r already there. 1 by r times 1 by r square is 1 by r cube, and there would be a negative sign. Similarly, when I differentiate with respect to r, differentiation of 1 by r square is minus 2 by r cube. So I would be getting a term which looks like this. Upon taking this minus sign common, the expression of electric field intensity because of an electric dipole is qd by 4 pi epsilon naught r cube 2 cos theta ar cap plus sin theta a theta cap, where qd is nothing but the magnitude of the dipole moment mod p bar. Therefore, electric field intensity is equals to mod p bar by 4 pi epsilon naught r cube 2 cos theta ar cap plus sin theta a theta cap. This is the electric field intensity because of one dipole. Now, if we are to apply this concept for multiple dipoles, I should be using the superposition theorem as we do always. Now, we have discussed the electric field because of one dipole. We have also seen that when an electric field is applied across a polar dielectric or a non-polar dielectric, you are creating dipoles. So what is the net effect of it? What is the observable change because of this electric field applied on a dielectric? We have seen that when an electric field is applied for an across a dielectric, electric dipoles are created. These electric dipoles have unbalanced charges. Although they are not free charges, they are still charges at rest. These charges will create electric flux lines inside them, because an electric flux line originates at one positive charge and would terminate at one negative charge. Therefore, there is increase in number of electric flux lines inside the dielectric medium as compared to the free space, right? Because of the increase in electric flux lines, there is increase in electric flux density. The electric flux density in free space is just epsilon naught times E bar, right? But in addition to this, you have one more quantity called capital P bar. This capital P bar is called the polarization. This is equal to, or the net sum of dipole moments. The net sum of dipole moments per unit volume. The polarization vector is defined as the net sum of dipole moments per unit volume. This is related with electric field intensity for isotropic mediums as P bar is equal to psi E epsilon naught E bar. This is the quantitative analysis of polarization vector. You may see this in a reference video, for which I'll provide you a link. It is an NPTEL video. I think he explains the concept best. So you may see that video there, but here I am just discussing the qualitative point of view is of what is happening because of electric field on a dielectric. So because of electric field inside dielectric, the electric flux density has been increased, and the amount of increase of electric flux density can also be related to electric field intensity as xi E times epsilon naught. So the electric field intensity can be written as epsilon naught times E bar plus xi E times epsilon naught E bar. If I take epsilon naught common, I can write this as epsilon naught times 1 plus xi E times the electric field intensity. This in turn can be written as epsilon, called the permittivity. Epsilon is called the permittivity of a medium, whereas epsilon naught is permittivity of free space. Xi E is the electric susceptibility of the medium. This is the ability of medium to generate more electric dipoles. So this, if susceptibility is high, that means more electric dipoles are created. If susceptibility is low, that means no dipoles are created. In free space, xi equals to 0. For free space, xi equals to 0, and this epsilon can be written as epsilon naught times epsilon r, where this epsilon r is equals to 1 plus xi. This is called relative permittivity of a medium, right? Thank you for your attention. These are the references, as always, Sadiku, our textbook, and this is the concept where I have told you polarization is available, right? So this is one video of 3 to 4 videos playlist. I suggest you to view all the 4 videos to get the perfect understanding of the derivation of relationship between polarization and electric field intensity. If you want me to discuss this, please mention in the comment section. I'll be much obliged and I would be uploading a video on the same topic. For any further queries, also please ask in the comment section, or you may also comment in the Google Classroom.